Welcome to Lovely Sim Racing Magazine. I'm Konstantinos, and today we'll be looking at my SF1000 steering wheel and how I've set it up in Assetto Corsa Competizione. So a little bit of information on my SF1000, which is right there. I've had this since May 2021. I was fortunate enough to get it, one of the first people to actually get the first batch that came out. So I've been using it for quite a long time, almost a year now. I do have a lot of things to say about this wheel. Most of them are positive. There are a few issues, but I will not get into those. I think we all know some issues that the SF1000 has, but that's not part of what I want to talk. So I mainly want to talk about how I've set up the SF1000 and how I use it with Assetto Corsa Competizione. Before I get into the actual settings of my wheel, I'd like to share the force feedback settings that I have set up. And let's switch over here and you can take a look. I've got my steering angle at 360 and the force feedback is at 75%, and I do have boost on. In game in Assetto Corsa, I do have 75% gain. Minimum force is 3%, and everything is basically at 0. And depending on the car, you want to switch your steering lock. So I use 480 for most cars because I'm used to it, but you can change it depending on what you use. Now, let's move on to the actual settings of the wheel. One thing to note about the SF1000, as many buttons as it may have, there are a few that aren't actually useful or used for racing. So the beautiful rotary encoder here with the Ferrari logo, the two rotary encoders left and right, and this one over here in the middle, and of course turning on and off the screen. These are used for controlling the actual wheel. Settings for the wheel, and this one specifically is for the behavior of the analog paddles, so that these buttons over here are something you cannot map. Most importantly, this wheel has 4 rotary encoders, which I absolutely love. They are positioned, 2 of them near the thumbs over here, and 2 of them down over here in each corner. So these are really easy to access, and these are the most important rotary encoders, actually most important buttons on the wheel in general. And I've mapped them to the right one is my traction control. So I increase traction control and decrease traction control. And on the left one, I move brake bias forward and then move it backwards. So they're just very important while you're racing, especially in mixed conditions. You want to be able to increase your traction control or decrease it. And then brake bias, you also want to be able to move it forward or backward, depending on the temperature or if it's wet or dry or whatever while racing. So these for me are, I really love them, and I love them that they're right next to my thumbs. The other 2 rotary encoders, one is for ABS, so I can decrease ABS or increase ABS, and the other one is for engine map, just in case you want to save some fuel or you want to make some changes while you're racing. So those are the 4 rotary encoders. Now, let's start off from the top left. Here we have the flasher. So when I tap on that, you blink your lights so the guy ahead of you knows you're coming. The second button from the left is labeled drink. I'm sure Kimmy would find this very amusing, but we don't have a drink, so we use it for something else. So this is a really good hint I'm using, and a little tip for Assetto Corsa. So I use this to cycle lights. So when you press on this, it just cycles through all the light stages. But if you take a look in Assetto Corsa Competizione, there's a little clock. I don't know what this actually means. It's a delay, I guess. I've mapped the same button to 2 different functions. Only on the second one, I've added a 0.5 second delay, which means I can use this button by clicking on it and cycle through all the light stages. And if I press and hold, then it turns on the rain light. And if I press and hold, it turns it off. This is pretty awesome because, you've got like 10 buttons you're using on your wheel, and suddenly you can basically double them. You can have them 20. You can group your buttons depending on how you use them. I don't have too many groups because there are so many buttons here I don't need them, but you get the point. You can do that. So moving on, the little radio button over here is used for showing me the timetables. When I tap on it, it pulls up timetables, and when I release it, they go away. So it's really useful when you're racing. You can just view what's going on, timetable wise. Then you have this little hat switch here, so you can go left, right, view behind, so you can look at what's going on behind you. If you're on triples, you may not need the left and right, but it also might be useful. It depends on how you race. Over here, labeled K1, I've got the cycle wiper, so you tap on it. 3 steps goes some slow, medium, and fast, and then it turns it off again. SHA. I use it for the secondary display, so I cycle through the display of the race logic in the vehicle while racing. It's useful, especially when you're doing poly. You can tap on it once and you can view, your gain or loss for every lap. This one over here, it is an encoder, but it also is a push button. So I've mapped this one to the vehicle dashboard. Ferrari, BMW, and not all vehicles, but some have multiple dashboards, and you can just cycle through those, which are very handy to do. Then on the right hand side, the P is obviously pit limiter. You engage and you disengage it manually. These 2 buttons are the HUD, the game HUD inside while you're racing. So with this one over here, I can cycle through every screen of the HUD, but this one over here, when I tap on it, it pulls up the, actually, see, I was about to get to that. So this one over here pulls up the HUD for the pit stop. So while you're racing, you don't want to cycle through all of the HUD screens. You tap on that, you pull up the pit stop HUD, you tap on that, it goes away. So it's a really nice combination I'm using here. The S1, I'm using it for crew chief. So when I tap on that, crew chief just gives me feedback on the race, my position, my fuel, tires, who's ahead, who's behind me, if I'm gaining or losing. You can basically customize crew chief any which way you want. And when you tap on that, you can just call him up and he gives you all the feedback. K2 is ignition. So you start the car. And this rotary encoder, when you tap on it, is the starter. So that's how you start the actual engine. And I guess that's basically all of the buttons that I'm using in game. Obviously, shift up, shift down. And the final one is where it says oil, which I'm using for the pause. So when you tap on that, you call up the menu, the pause menu. You can go back to your garage. You can settings or whatever you want. Now, those are in-game controls. Outside the game, this basically over here can you can see it navigates throughout your UI and also in the pit stop HUD, so you can navigate through the pit stop HUD with that. This one over here is confirm button, so when I tap on that, it confirms whatever decision I've made. Now that should cover most of whatever I'm using for racing using the SF1000 in a Assetto Corsa Competizione. Now, if you're like me and you cannot remember most of the stuff that you assigned, or at least when you're racing it for the first time and you want to keep track of everything, I've created a few templates here, which are pretty cool. Let me zoom in here. There they are. I have these templates. They're PDF, so you can make them as big as you want or as small as you want. They're very useful. I will put a link in the description of the video. You can download them, obviously, for free. As you use the wheel day in, day out, you will get used to them, and you don't need that. But for for starters, they're pretty useful, at least for me, especially when the wheel has so many options and so many buttons. You can just mark them down. I've moved things a lot. Okay, so this is not what I had in the beginning. You will find what makes you feel more comfortable or what makes sense while racing. You will figure it out. What I have here is probably not something that everyone would like to have. It's what I use. And that concludes the first edition of the lovely Sim Racing magazine. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, and I will try and put as much more out there as I can. See you on the next one.